We're now live. Hello, I'm John from Broadsheet. Good evening. You're very welcome to Tomorrow Tonight. We're very honoured to be joined by the Green Party's Dan Boyle, Councillor on Cork City Council. Good evening, Dan.
Good evening, John.
And how are you?
Actually, not too bad, not too bad. A slightly busier day than usual. Maybe it's a sign of things starting to loosen up, who knows?
Yeah, you've been out and about?
As it happens, I had a very strange walkabout. There's a wooded area next to a chemical factory in Ringaskiddy that the chemical factory is about to sell, and there's local concern that the amenity might be available, that might be knocked down and turned into industrial or housing use. So it was a bit strange, to see something next to a tailing pond and things like that. But it's a lovely amenity, and it's not too far from where I actually live. And the logic would say that it should be kept and should be a public amenity. But these are things that are determined through the system.
Yeah. And how is the weather down there? Is it you seem to have got a bit of colour?
Glorious day. I mean, the temperature is still, I suppose, it's not much above 10 degrees sort of thing, but it's very bright, blue skies. It's not a typical April. We're not getting the showers. We're getting some bit of consistency. It's cool, but it's pointing the way towards a possible summer.
Yes, and tonight, I guess the big story. Before I get to that, sorry, your column today was excellently received, and
I was surprised. Because I thought it was taking the kind of the troll side of the argument, but it kind of justified some of the argumentation I was making, that people are thinking differently about transport modes and the role of the bike and the role of the car and things like that. It was good to have the debate, I think, as much as anything else.
Yeah, excellent. Just a point you make in the piece, the urban myth is easier for some to believe due to the fact, a perception that the cycling renaissance is seen largely as a middle-class activity. Would that be the case down in Cork? Is it more?
I think it's the case in general, and in the sense that the incentives are based, they're tax-based incentives, the bike to work scheme and things like that. It hasn't reached a level that we would have been in the 50s and the 60s of the bike being the preferred mode of transport and things like that. And
yes.
The Flann O'Brien example that I was trying to bring across, that was the natural way of getting around in Ireland in the 1950s, 50s, 60s. But I think we can get back there, and it maybe it's not helped by being seen as a kind of a fashion statement and stuff like that. But Ireland, I would argue, is likely to be a cycling culture as much as the Dutch or the Germans or the Danes. It's just that we left it behind because it was seen to be kind of a cultural millstone around our necks, and to improve as a country, we needed to become car owners and get rid of the bikes. And considering that for a start.
I've never seen a city more bike friendly than Copenhagen. I don't know if you've ever been.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. Well, Denmark in general, I think the highest point in Denmark is 400 meters, which is about a third. So it's one of the flattest countries in the world,
Nice.
So they have a natural advantage there.
And wide streets as well, I guess, in the capital. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, they would have planned their cities accordingly. But the myth about Amsterdam is that they would have had very much a car culture in the 1960s, and they had to move from where they were to where they are now, and they would have had the same arguments about street space and
medieval kind of city.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you don't cycle, Dan, do you?
I have an electric bike. I have an additional bike which has drop handlebars, which don't suit my physique anymore, John, but I have an electric bike for about 6 months now, and while I had an accident on it because of the handlebars slipping on me when I initially bought it, I do enjoy it. It's you still have to pedal, and
right, yeah. So it's a bit of both. It's a hybrid.
Yeah, you get up hills, and you go further than you otherwise, that your lungs and your body build would allow you to otherwise, I think. So
great. Well, you might be back out in that soon.
Yeah, I've been taking a few burns over the last few days. It's the weather is improving.
So tonight, I just wanted to. I don't know if you saw Stephen Donnelly on prime time.
I didn't see it, but yeah, I heard him earlier, and he's sounding very upbeat.
Right.
It's one of the more positive NEFIT reports he's had for a while in terms of the R rate and the number of people in hospital. Uh,
Right.
Now, there's still a journey to go, but there's probably the first sense, maybe not the first sense, but a better sense of direction that we're going is since the start of December that we've had over that time period. I was looking at a set of figures today about the difference between lifting level 5 at the start of December and the peak in January. And it was such a rapid movement of high numbers in such a short period of time. So it was really appalling set of figures. We're starting to control it, but because of the European situation, it's not something we can be complacent about. That's for sure.
And this evening, then the mandatory hotel quarantine system is under question by the European Commission. They've written to the government to saying that there's a possibility this is in contravention of EU movement, freedom of movement.
I'm not surprised at that because it was very much foisted, or the government was pressurized to bring it about. In terms.
By whom?
Well, I think the general debate about whether we should have a particular approach in terms of zero COVID and adopt an Australian and New Zealand approach.
Yeah.
Because the mandatory hotel quarantine is still very much out of line with EU approach.
Yes.
About that in countries that have far worse figures than us, the continental Europe, Germany. Well, Germany would be similar, but France, Spain, Italy. The only countries I'm aware of who have adopted the model would be non-EU countries. It would be Britain next door to us and Norway, which has a version of it that is slightly milder than what we have in place at the moment.
And Queensland in Australia.
Well, Australia and New Zealand have had it because they've adopted a particular zero COVID policy.
They started it. I mean, they began like.
Well, they did, and there's going to be an awful lot of analysis when we finally tackle COVID, because I mean the issues of geography, of climate, of north and southern hemisphere. These are all going to have to be examined, I think, when we look at the final figures over the 2-year period that we've had to live with this across the globe.
Yeah, to just go with the MHQ, which seemed, well, on the face of it, was a violation of the Constitution, but it was also, it seemed obvious. You mentioned it, or I mentioned it. What about freedom of movement? What about the EU's directives? What about human rights?
Well, I suppose that's where the questioning is coming about.
But did nobody think of this like prior, to?
Well,
you've got soldiers meeting people off planes from America. It's weird. It seems.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember that since in the last 13 months, that European countries have adopted individual approaches, starting with Italy and including Germany. So having a combined EU approach hasn't been possible for the last year in any case.
Yeah.
And being on an island separate to the European landmass means that we've had to take a particular approach. It may not be the right approach. It may not be the most effective approach, but that our right and our ability to take such decisions, I don't think should be questioned, even though I can understand why there might be.
Yeah. It should be questioned by ourselves, though, as well. Initially,
exactly.
It shouldn't just take Europe. Also, the second thing was on the AstraZeneca. Leo Varadkar said that if you don't take it, you're going to get to the back of the queue.
I'm not sure if he did say that, but I mean, I've seen that reported. It's a curious one in the sense that both the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson single jab are subject to higher levels of blood clotting, which in terms of overall risk, is still lower than risks that people face in general medical practice, and indeed women in particular face from the use of contraceptive pill in particular. Yeah, so it. I suspect it's because the need for vaccination is total amongst the entire population, that any level of doubt brings about a vaccine hesitancy, and that's why people are prepared to stop or to limit the use of these drugs.
Yeah.
Denmark has made a decision not to use AstraZeneca at all. Decision has been for 60 plus. Italy is 60 plus. Other countries are 55 plus. Some are 50 plus. I suspect there'll be some kind of combination of doses of different vaccines.
Just on the language, though, Dan, in terms of get to the back of the queue, and I am paraphrasing, but it wasn't far from that. I'm just trying to find the exact quote.
Well, if he did say that, it would be certainly unfortunate, and it would be the wrong type of messaging. I mean, the last thing we need to encourage is a vaccine hesitancy. That's
Could I play Stephen Donnelly this evening on
Sure.
With Fran McNulty? Fran McNulty's the new presenter, isn't he?
So I've heard. Yeah,
he did very well this evening on this interview. Actually, I thought.
One of the issues that came up today.
Can you hear that, Frank?
Yeah.
AstraZeneca, and we have heard several cabinet ministers now use the term as blunt as back of the queue. Is that fair or right, or is it common sense? Surely we should be trying to get as many people in that cohort vaccinated, if not for their sake, for the sake of our health service.
Is it right that people should?
Is it a mature thing to do to say to people, back of the queue, take what you're given, or back of the queue, you don't want Astra?
I don't really understand what that means.
Well, I'll explain it.
Yeah.
If you have somebody coming in and saying, I don't want AstraZeneca, and the answer we're being told will be given is back of the queue. If you don't want what you're being given,
that's it cuts off there, I'm afraid. But,
I suppose he couldn't say anything else, to be honest, if he didn't hear the actual quote, and I haven't heard it myself. But I think anything that discourages take up is going to be unfortunate, and at the same token, anything that doesn't recognise that fears and uncertainty is created by the debate that is engendered by making decisions that are changed every so often as well. That the whole COVID situation has been fluid from day one, and government can't win in terms of having to adapt its policy on a daily basis, which is the reality. And by the same token, there has to be an understanding that the public at large is going to react accordingly, in terms of its uncertainty as to what a policy is and how it's being enacted. This is a virus that has us all at sea, and we have to be agile in how we adapt to it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the papers, shall we?
Sure.
He's having a bit of a nightmare, though, isn't he, Donnelly? I mean, to be fair.
Well, it's been Angola since Brian Cowan's time, and I don't think it's changed much.
No. The messaging was a bit weird today. Anyway, hospitality may reopen by summer. That's the cruel headlines, aren't they? May.
Yeah, and I suppose in Ireland we have a different way of measuring the seasons. Our seasons are meant to come a month earlier, but I suspect they'll be more elastic this year.
Yeah. More jail time for hate crimes. Criminals convicted under new hate crime laws will have prison sentences increased by up to a quarter. The Criminal Justice Pay Bill, which will be introduced by Helen McAtee today, later tomorrow, will create new aggravated forms of criminal offence where those offences are motivated by prejudice.
Yeah, well, I suppose the nature of hate crimes is to how to identify them and then subsequently how to prosecute. And a lot of
a minefield, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, and a lot of it's brought about by social media. So, my own impression would be that it's less about the legal definition and more about properly defining social media companies in terms of whether they're publishers or not. I happen to think they are. Their defense has been constantly that they're not.
Well, they are now, yeah, aren't they? I mean, they're deleting everyone. I mean, even
Exactly.
the mildest
Yeah.
of the official narrative. The yeah, it's probably worth a show of its own. That hate bill. Party Central guy.
Well, it's the landlord who won the court case last week. I was actually at the Residents Association, the local Residents Association meeting on Monday, and they didn't contest the original court action, mainly out of fear of drawing themselves into more legal costs and the like. But they've left themselves the avenue of reintroducing such actions at a circuit court level. So I think his it's a kind of strange statement. He's more or less having a go at the people that he rents his premises to.
Yes, not the best.
And the whole core of the issue is that he, as a landlord, and people like him have a certain responsibility to the communities where they have their properties. And I don't think he's addressing that at all, to be honest.
Oh, he's some character.
He's in his 80s, so he's a kind of particular.
Blimey! All right, I thought he was a.
Yeah.
Okay. Good Lord. Well, he's and his tenants are like 18.
Well, this is it. I mean, the reality is that he uses agents and to put people into his properties, and he has very little direct responsibility. But it's how you define responsibility and who has ultimate responsibility, and that's what he seems to be avoiding in this case, I think.
Yeah. So he's well known then in Cork, kind of character.
In a particular part of the city, yeah. He would have dozens of properties.
Okay. I just got the Irish Sun. It's not really a national story, but a money mule caged. Not sure if you can see that. Can you do that?
I can. I don't have a lot of familiarity about it, but I did come across the story that the British Sun or the Sun element of the Rupert Murdoch papers lost about 60 million sterling last year, which might indicate what its future might be. It took over. It went to being a 7-day paper when the News of the World had to close. So I think that kind of pressure and COVID and the like has put in a different situation.
Yeah, and they sold up their shares in Sky as well, didn't they? I mean,
well, the Fox, the Murdoch operation and Fox in general has been it's been divided into different responsibilities. I think the children or his son, one son in particular, Lachlan, I think is, or I keep forgetting which child is responsible for which. One is disowned his father, I think, and the business, and the other is carrying business.
Yeah, Lachlan kind of disowned it, but I think he's kind of come back into the fold.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like Game of Thrones stuff. 3 city schools and talks on future.
Yeah, these are all Northside schools, so none of them are in my electoral area. So they're all very traditional schools, and they're all very close to each other. And it probably says a lot about Catholic management of school boards and schools in general. Very traditional schools, very historic schools in a Cork context, but it speaks both to declining Catholic power in terms of education and changing demographics in different parts of the city. So, it looks like there's going to be a single school with several campuses, and in an economic sense, that probably makes sense.
Right. Does it reflect anything on the kind of religious makeup of that area? Or?
Yeah, well, the 3 schools they kind of surround like a necklace the Catholic Cathedral, the North St. Mary's Cathedral, North Cathedral. So I think it says something about the Catholic influence in Cork City in general. So it's it'll be interesting. New bishop for the last year or so. So
what's he like?
Well, to be honest, because of COVID, I haven't met him on a one-to-one basis, so I can't really tell. Cork bishops have had a very strong personality in the past.
Lucy.
He is, he built a lot of schools in the churches in the 50s and 60s. And he was responsible for this thing called the Connie Dodger, which is when Lent was more seriously taken by people of the Catholic faith. You were supposed to have one meal during the day, a bit like Ramadan, and Cork bakers came up with this thing called the Connie Dodger, which was a pizza-sized biscuit, on which people could feast. So,
as a snack, like none, and wouldn't count as a meal. Brilliant.
Exactly.
That's great. I love that. Is that not a tradition still? No, it doesn't carry on.
No, because I mean, Lent is not taken to the same degree, I think, so
they only do like one meal a day. That's amazing, isn't it? That's probably why they're so healthy. Urgent concern over rapid tests as false positive sore. This is the
well, I suppose we have some experience of this ourselves in terms of cervical cancer and the like, and the smears. The thing about testing is that it's good for overall trends, but it's bad for individual circumstances, because what you're getting is an overall variable, and that doesn't measure precisely every test that's done. And you will get false negatives, and you will get people whose circumstances are terribly affected by having such a false negative, and that's why we have the cervical cancer scandal in this country, really. So it's the inability of having testing that tells people what they need on an individual basis, whereas telling the system what they need to know on a general basis, and get balance right. And that's the more testing we do for COVID, the more likelihood that's going to happen as well.
Quite a harrowing picture of Prince Charles on the cover of the Times.
Look, I mean, it's a man who's lost his father. It's a family who's lost its patriarch. It's whatever is his personal history, and especially in relation to making particular gaffes and the like, you can only feel sorry for a family in South. There was one particular take I saw. Was it? I think it was Fintan O'Toole, which wasn't a bad take. That Philip was someone who was quintessentially a European in terms of having a Danish, German, and Greek background, and was made to represent the epitome of Britishness, which is a good kind of.
It's that he was like an immigrant washed up, penniless. Kind of his view. Brexit really has clouded his judgment on the English, I think, Fintan. I must say, just as a personal observation.
I mean, he's certainly been relentless in a particular analysis for the last 3 or 4 years. So there's no doubt about that.
Everything is through that prism as well, Well,
it is, and I suppose it's influenced by the fact that the British, in terms of an establishment-run society, and because it's monarchical, what is that? But
run by a woman.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily, nor has it ever been, a democratic society. I mean, Britain only had the right to vote for all citizens, and not even all citizens in 1918. Women had to be the age of 30. In fact, Ireland as a republic reached an equal basis for men and women voting before Britain did. And it's still struggling with the idea that it's run by Etonians and Oxbridge, and it lacks a lot of democratic qualities.
It does, but that's only half the story, isn't it, really? Like, you've been there, you worked in Wales and stuff. I mean, there's something that I think Irish commentators miss. I mean, certainly from the anti-Brexit side, anyway, I think, about the English,
Yeah, well, I mean,
they simply do not,
Well, part of it is losing an empire and not and not adjusting to its role in the world, sort of thing. Like that.
Yeah, there is that, and that
Yeah.
is the argument. That like
Yeah.
they're all kind of harking back, but they don't really. I mean, the London sort of, you go to Camden, it's absolutely nothing, none of that. It's so. That race document is quite interesting because I never found it particularly racist. And I lived in Tottenham and Elephant and Castle and stuff. Like the police, there was systematic racism there. There was clearly that. I mean, I witnessed that on so many occasions. But from the people, I gotta say, it wasn't as egregious.
Well, I think a lot of it is that there was a book recently in the United States having this theory that the United States is a living country. I think it's a lot of nonsense. It could be applied to Britain in the sense that London is a different country, that the north of England is a different country, that and Wales are very obviously different countries, and Northern Ireland is something that probably can't be defined in any way.
No, not yet.
So and a lot of the Brexit difficulty, whether we're part of Europe or not, or whether Britain has to stand alone, informed by the fact that it's a country that isn't able to deal with its own internal contradictions. That it is several countries and things like that.
Yeah, and people still want to go there. They want to emigrate to there.
Oh yeah. I think there are a lot of fine qualities. And you can only be in awe of a lot of the architecture and some of the scenery. I find it very hard to take that this kind of there'll always be an England attitude of Middle England and stuff like that. Middle England is quite beautiful.
Yeah. And those values, like when you meet the Middle England values, they're so, I mean, dull perhaps and plodding, but my God, there's a stoicism and there's a reserve and come handy now, actually, a lot of those qualities. But I kind of cringe when I read sometimes, particularly people of kind of Finton's, intellect and whatnot. Embryo making.
It's a sad picture, though. I mean, he's a 70-year-old man who is waiting to take over a throne that might still be 5 or 6 years away from him, and may not be much of a reign subsequently.
Yeah, he has two children. He has a child who's, in LA.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the problems of a regular dad, I guess.
This is it.
But the independent health secretary. The sleaze is really coming back into British politics, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was under John Major's government the last time, and Major himself was kind of aside from all that, a fairly decent and honest guy in his own right, but his cabinet was full of creeps, whereas Johnson has made a cabinet that's in his own image. We not only have this kind of situation where the health minister has shares in a company that his sister owns, and from decisions he makes himself. And this comes on last week. I think we talked about it last week, that a civil servant, a serving civil
is on the board of.
He was getting paid by the company who were making representations to the government.
Absolutely incredible, isn't it?
We've had situations in terms of our civil servants and state agencies and stuff like that, but at least there's been some kind of distance.
Yeah. Well, this is no boundaries. They've got no boundaries.
None at all. It seems
extraordinary. Looks can be deceptive, but you just got to look at this guy.
He's not impressive. He's not impressive in terms of being articulate and being intelligent.
Oh, no, just ruthless, I guess.
Yeah, like a lot of Johnson's cabinet, he's there because he's not there to be a challenge to Johnson.
Right, yeah, exactly. Land Rover hearse for his final journey.
I suppose everything has to be British.
Yeah. I thought they'd, the sport he did, the carriage thing, like with he had to wear a top hat.
Yeah. Oh, yes. It was eventing. Yeah, 3-day eventing. Was
Event, yeah. I think he was one of the best in the world because nobody else could afford to run an eventing team.
Well, his daughter was an Olympic finalist in it as well, I think. Yeah.
Was, of course, yeah. But again, I think you had to like run a whole stable full
Indeed.
Queen silent moment, pain of loss edge. Gosh, he really does has aged. And part human, part monkey embryo is created by scientists.
Oh, well.
There we go.
Actually, it's strange to see that in the eye. That's almost a Daily Express front page.
Yeah, I know. I suppose it's kind of a reunion, is it?
Well, it is, and I think it's. I haven't read this story, but I know that one of Elon Musk's side project is it Neuralink or something along those lines,
Right.
enhance performance. So we're into that kind of dodgy ethical. And moral scientific area at the moment, and if it's for profit purposes, it's worse, I think.
Well, this is sort of old school Frankenstein stuff, isn't it? It's hilarious, really. Good.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's based on the fact that chimpanzees have 95% of our DNA already.
Yeah.
Go in Admiral's uniform or something. I don't know if they made a decision about that, but yeah, apparently he wanted to use it as a PR opportunity to enhance his.
Yeah. Can you hear? There's nothing to another.
No, they're leaving Afghanistan apparently earlier ahead of schedule. So
yeah, they're great.
We'll see return of the lads, I think. Yeah. So.
Yeah, the Taliban.
That's 20 years was about.
Yeah, I mean, it was like America's Great Game or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I suppose the heroin will dry up now. The Taliban are not big on the poppy.
Well, the Taliban, I think, were responsible for and are responsible for a lot of the heroin not coming out of Afghanistan, as far as I know.
I thought that they were burning down the poppy fields back in the early noughties and before the Americans.
But subsequently, they've been using it as a cash crop to fund their own activities.
Right.
So who knows?
Yeah. I thought their religion didn't allow,
well, alcohol certainly. I don't know if they have any particular comment. I don't know if Muhammad ever said anything about cocaine. Yeah, so.
No. U.S. sanctions anger Russia. That's kind of sort of saber rattling.
Yeah, the troops on the Ukraine border. I think that's trying to make people uncomfortable. I hope not, and I don't think there'll be a direct invasion one way or the other. There's already parts of Ukraine that are Russian control, not only Crimea but bits of the eastern border are controlled, but very much by Russia already.
Yeah, it's. I don't think either are ready are up for it at the moment.
No.
Bloke fined for guffing on a copper. What's guffing? Launches legal fight back claiming it's freedom of speech. He guff.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it depends what kind of orifice you speak out of, I guess, but can't see how it's freedom of speech, but yeah.
But one bloke is free speech comes in many forms. One bloke is literally talking. And it was, the man fighting for farting on a copper is now fighting for. That's funny. Well, in America, wasn't it? They decreed that porn was free speech. Well,
and apparently he only died last month, I think, or certainly early this year. The guy who used to run Hustler,
Larry Flint.
Larry Flint, that Oliver Stone made the film out of, that Woody Harrelson was acting in.
Yeah,
and that was his Supreme Court case, which he won.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, complete degenerate,
Indeed, yeah.
But I suppose freedom for people who like porn, freedom to people who.
Yeah, well, I suppose these type of things is to what extent is it in an individual activity, and to what extent does it affect the society at large? And The whole questions about porn is to what extent women in particular are used and abused. Those fine lines. I mean, it's argued these days that women are active participants and head and tail, if you pardon the pun, of the porn industry. But that certainly hasn't been the case for the last 50 years. That the women have been very much the meat in the sandwich of pornography and used to a huge extent.
Yeah, and then men, the porn addiction. I mean, I imagine in lockdown it's increased, but it is a huge problem that with young men.
Well, it seems to have a whole lot of side effects, and not only about young men and their attitude towards women in general, but it seems to be affecting potency. It seems to be affecting virility.
Personality, character.
It's a real black hole in terms of the future of the human race as a species in general. I think
This is it. I mean, are you familiar with the no fat movement in America? These are guys who swear off porn, swear off masturbation, swear off not in a puritanical way, but certainly getting off the porn addiction must it seems to, when you read their case studies, of really afflicting, because of high-speed internet. When we had like the catalog for Playtex or something.
Well, this is it. Yeah, it's. I used to, when I was young, I used to have Marvel comics and things like that, and we used to go into a local bookstore to change the comics. Another customer was being given other magazines and things like that.
Right.
And then.
They used to sell the H&M, was it the nude, kind of like, but it wasn't really porn.
The naturist magazines.
Naturist, yeah. Worth a discussion. So have you a busy week ahead, Dan?
Well, next week I actually have. I'm doing this juggling at the moment where I have it's not only city council because of an appointment I have. I'm an alternate on a thing called the European Union's Committee of the Regions. I have a meeting on Tuesday in relation to that, and I'm also a member of the Southern Regional Assembly. So it's a nice mix to have. It doesn't make me any richer, but it makes me more fulfilled in making sure that I make contribution in more places. Yeah.
What are the regions? How do they?
Ireland is divided into three regions outside of Northern Ireland. So you have the Southern region, and they're more or less the European election constituencies. So, but the East, that's not strictly true, because Dublin is put into something called the Eastern and Midland region. So it takes North Leinster and Dublin together, whereas and Wicklow, Western region.
Right.
And it's about. It's about how you allocate European Union funds, really, which is kind of a silly exercise at this stage, because we're now a net contributor. So
yeah.
With a regional government responsibility.
Yeah, completely. Like a local. I mean, there's no way that. And then they're much more accountable, aren't they? Like corp,
Well, this is it. I mean, the experience shows that the closer people are to the decision.
Absolutely, yeah. And
a lot of the cynicism we feel that is felt about politics in general is because people can't relate to it. They're too distant from it. They feel that they're powerless to affect things that affect their lives, and that's where the cynicism thrives, really.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. Fantastic.
My pleasure.
Tonight, and Dan's column on the cycling renaissance and all things wheel based is on the site today. Thank you so much, Dan, and see you.